that. In the top here we have this umbrella light, as you can see, but the inside of the umbrella is filled with a not quite metal material, but more of like a crinkled tin foil that's slightly rough, and that gives a more harsh light because it's creating more of a direct reflection of the light. So it's very hard. The shadows are going to be really tight, and it's going to be much more harsh. And also, when you're lighting anything in 3D and you have a really reflective surface, you're going to have to take into account the shape of the light being a part of your render, because it'll just show up in your more reflective objects. And then going down the line here, we have another bounce, but this one is off of a rougher material. Here's one where it diffuses through a paper so that it creates a very soft shadow. If you look here, it's even filling in some of the parts that are almost entirely occluded by the face. And here's a similar one, and then here's one with a really high reflectancy, so it creates really harsh shadows, which you can see here. You're getting total blacks behind the nose here. Yeah, that's just the same on the bottom too. All right. Fundamentals of light. So every ray that comes out of, or every photon that comes out of a light source hits something and is either absorbed, reflected, refracted, or kind of redirected like a fluorescent light. So if I was just going to open Photoshop quick and show you what I mean by that. So let's say we have our material here. Hold on. Let me do this correctly. There we go. So let's say we have our material here, and we have our molecules of the material here. And we have some light coming in. So this light is hitting the molecules of the material, and is either being our four principles over here: refracted, absorbed, reflected, or fluorescenced. So basically what that means is that if it's being absorbed, what's happening is these little molecules are taking in the light and they're scattering it within this space. So they're pushing it here, and then there's another molecule that'll push it to the next one, and then every time it does this, it loses just a little bit of energy, and then it ends up disappearing in there by just absorption into the material. And then that's how a material gets warm. It brings in the energy and then dissipates it. When a material reflects something, that means that it's taking in the light and it's sending it back out at a certain radius of its intake angle. So here it's coming in at this angle, and then let's say within 45 degrees either way it can escape. So it's coming out in this range, which creates the reflection that you see. Now in refraction, it's almost the opposite. It comes in and then it pushes out within a certain angle, and it's a much tighter angle. And the more refraction that you have generally depends on how these molecules are ordered. So you can see in this one, these two are directly after each other, so you'll get a very straight reflection through the material. But let's say there's a molecule over here, you're coming in here, and then this light is hitting this, and then it's coming out of the other side of the material here. Now the light is transferring from this location to this location, and you're getting a distorted image. Okay, and then incandescence absorbs the light and then resends it out in a radio wave format as opposed to just directly reflecting it. So it's almost like it's taking in, transforming it in here, and then sending it out in a different wavelength. In 3D programs, we can then take that different wavelength calculation and change it into a mask or like some other a separate pass so that we can bring it up or down so that we can highlight our objects. All right, so back to here. So 3-point lighting. 3-point lighting, the 3 points are key light, fill light, and the backlight or the rim light. They're slightly different, but we'll get into that. The key light is what you see on the top here. It's the main light on your subject. Me right now, I have a key light coming from this direction, and it's lighting half of my face over here. And the main shadows are coming from that direction. So this is like your strongest light, and it's going to create most of the shadows on your face, like on the side of your nose and around the corners of your face. The fill light is the one on the bottom here. It's the reason that you can see the other side of my face. It's a much dimmer light that allows you to bring in detail in your shadows so that you don't just have blacks and whites. And your rim light along the edge here is to highlight the silhouette of your object. It helps you identify it, pick it out of a scene really quickly, and it's become a very common practice in film and movies that or film and TV shows and animations and that sort of thing, that they'll add a rim light to a character or a object just to make sure that the person watching can see it and that it's an important object in the scene. Environment lighting. It's important to keep your characters kind of embedded in a scene, in a 3D scene. So you'd want the scene or the character to bring in the look of the lights from the scene. So I believe this top shot has a character that has been just edited into a 3D scene. So what they did is they recorded this character and they matched the lighting to this character. So they have a blue shoulders here, so they added a blue overlight, and then there's a warm highlight along his side here, so they added this, and it sinks him in the scene, and it creates a contextuality in your mind that you're able to understand that it's all working. There's nothing going on in the background here. Image-based lighting, HDRIs. HDRIs are a super useful way to get really good looking, quick lighting. Basically what it is if you ever go on Google Earth and you see like the image that's all the way around you, that's an image like a JPEG, and what it's doing is it's just wrapping that image into a sphere, and basically an HDRI is the same as that, but what they've done is they've taken the same photograph at multiple exposures so that when you bring the exposure or the exposure of your image all the way down, you still have your whites, but all your blacks are black, so that you're you can indicate the depths of your lighting. And then when you bring it all the way up in the blacks, you have still a lot of detail, where in the low you would have no detail light-wise, and then your whites are blown out, and it gives you a lot of extra detail and the ability to edit it while you're in 3D to match your scene. Camera settings. I from high school, I came from a photography background. I took 3 years of photography, and so this was something that transferred straight over to 3D. Apertures are like there's a little thing in the camera that looks like a bunch of little arms that lock together, and then when you hit the the button to make it open or take the picture, they open up like this to a certain amount that you specify to let in X amount of light, and then they close again. That would be normally to expose a piece of film, but they've also used it now to do digital. So the way that I remember the connection between this aperture setting and the depth of field, which is what it's directly correlated to, is there used to be a group of photographers called the Pinhole Photographers, and they did landscape photography. So what they would do is they would have almost a room, and they'd put like a pinhole in one side of it, and then the light would come through that pinhole, and it would project an image on the wall, and it would all be in focus. Nowadays, we take a lot of those focus things for granted because our phones do an excellent job of it. But it allows it to all be in focus, and it gives you a lot of depth in your image. But if you want a closer depth of field, you're going to want to widen up your aperture so that you have more distortion coming from the parts that are out of focus. So shutter speed is what it is how fast that shutter opens and closes. They usually, for like sports photography, they make it in like, I don't know, a 16th of a millisecond. So it's like instant. It opens, takes in the information of that single frame that it's being shown, and then closes. But if you want to do like motion blur in your renders, you're going to want to increase that so that the camera opens, takes in the amount of the information from one edge of the motion blur to the other edge of the motion blur, and then closes so that you get that blurred effect. And ISO sensitivity is kind of a grain thing, but I mean, it can be used to pull a lot of information out of your rich darks, but that doesn't transfer over to 3D too well because it's actually close to the opposite, because you're creating the information, you're not trying to capture it. All right. Rendering. So when you're rendering your objects, it's taking your lights and creating a beam from your light, and then it's landing on your geometry. And then the camera is being ray traced, so it's shooting rays similar to a light onto your scene, and it's picking each point that it sees, each pixel, and it's sensing what information is on that one, and it's sending it back to the camera. And we've been able to make this faster and faster, and now we have games that have ray tracing. Global illumination is it's kind of like a given threshold that the lighting can't go under. If you look here in this scene, on the top left here, we have a room that's being lit only from this skylight and this side door, which means that the wall over here and this back area is completely black. But that doesn't really happen in real life because the light bounces like so much that it doesn't stop on one bounce and then like everything else is black. It bounces around so much that it kind of fills the space with light. And that's what global illumination is used for. So instead of computing all of those bounces for the light, it brings up your your darks based on proximity to other lights, and it fills in the information. And then if you really wanted, you could take something like this with your global illumination and then your non-global illumination and mix them together using one as a multiplier on top, and then tweak how far you want those shadows to be. Render passes. I believe Calyptus's class is, just finished this or is working on it right now. Basically, for this example here, we have ambient occlusion, we have reflections here, we have refraction, and then our diffuse map. If you're used to making textures by hand and putting them in and doing that, you'll know all these maps that you might put into your texture. You got your diffuse map, and if you just put in your diffuse and you render it, it's going to look like flat colors without any lighting. So that can be used as a base to bring up those colors if you want. And then reflections, you can bring those up and down. Basically, you use this in a compository layer system, and then you can multiply it by a certain amount or add it or subtract it from certain areas, use it as masks, that sort of thing. Optimization. So a lot of render engines will have presets kind of baked in for how they feel or how they've tested the you would need in a normal workflow, but a lot of times you'll run into errors where you need to go and shuffle into the settings and check on something because it doesn't work the way you might expect. So here's an example where most render engines nowadays, I think with the exception of like 2 or 3 main ones, only reflect a piece of light 4 times. So that works really well for like normal lighting because you don't want it to bounce 100 times because that's going to take forever for the computer to compute, as we talked about. But if you do want that, say if you have like a barber shop where you have 2 mirrors on either side, you're going to want to dive into the settings and up that number of bounces, and then you can get that barbershop effect where there's 2 mirrors on either side and you can look and it's just an infinite stream. A lot of render engines will also have a basic a default setting for their samples. The samples will probably be around 16, give or take 8. And basically, when you're rendering, you want to always set the samples to a root of 2. So 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 24, 48, 2, 4, 8, 16, 32, 64, 256, 124, 2, yeah, you get it. Multiply it by 2 each time. And, yeah. They'll also have things like caustics and motion blur turned off by default. And if you're going to want those effects, you have to go in and check them on. So here's the big debate with which render engine you use, CPU, GPU, or both. The both thing, I think there's only V-Ray hybrid renderer and Corona renderer that are non-biased renders. I know that's topical, but CPU renders will have a lot of grunt to them, so they can process loads and loads of really heavy computational problems quite quickly. but GPUs can calculate thousands of like really short, easy problems almost instantly. So that's the difference. If you have a scene where you have just loads of geometry and like tons of different lighting systems and all that stuff, it may actually be faster to render with a CPU because it can handle those heavier calculations. And if you just have a heavy scene, then it's more than comparable. A lot of the pretty much exclusively larger studios like Disney, DreamWorks, Sony, Illumination use CPU rendering for their images, partially because they have massive render farms, which makes things that you want done just quickly as a test very quick. But yeah, and caustics are significantly faster to render on a CPU because that is a very hefty calculation. All right, 3-point lighting. I think we kind of went over. Yeah, I think we went over this. So that's the standard 3-point lighting, with this being the back and your camera being somewhere over here. Your key light coming from the side. You can see how this side is almost entirely black just because it's just the key. Oh yeah, here's a good example of the key with the fill. So here you have the key, and here you have it with the fill so that you can pull detail out of your shadows. Rim and backlight, and the kicker. So the important difference between a rim light and a kicker is that a rim light encases the entire silhouette of your, or not necessarily the entire silhouette, but a large highlighted region of the silhouette, and doesn't highlight the front of the object at all. If you want to use a kicker, on the other hand, then you're going to want it to be a very side directional light that is strong, so it almost blows out the camera. It's often even stronger than the key light, but it's just used as an edge highlight. So if you look on this bottom one here, you have this highlight on the side of their face, and that's from the kicker. And then we have 4-point lighting. Basically, at the end of the day, this means that you're adding another light to the background, which gives you both a bounce light in the back, which can be useful, especially if you're doing any object that has any level of refraction or subsurface to it. Often they need a base background with light. If you just have nothing in your scene, it won't look correct. Yeah. And this is a diagram that I drew of all the lights that I sometimes use in 3D. So I have, I like using a lot of separate key lights so that I don't blow out any individual detail by just trying to get that shape correct. Using basically a silhouette of your object as a key light is ideal, but it's not going to happen, so you can just block it out with area lights. Your backlight is like a edge highlight that isn't the key, so sometimes I'll use that. We talked about the kicker, background fill. Your fill should be more of a soft box light, so it should be very diffused, no hard shadows, just very flat. And then the key is off to your key side. Temperature in light is very useful. It was first used by Leonardo da Vinci. I think we learned this one in Color and Comp. This is the first painting to ever show blue depth or blue shift, I think it's called. Not the space blue shift, like the fog distant blue shift. But anyways, it can shift your perception where things in the distance they look blue, and then things that are close to you look red. And so, say in this image, it looks interesting, and it kind of brings you into the center of the image because your mind is telling you that the rim is closer than the center, when in fact the center is closer than the rim. So the edge kind of is the defining part of it. If you flipped that, it would look like just a slimmer person. And these are the different Kelvin temperatures for the different light temperatures. All right. So now I put together a little folder if anyone wants to do it along with me. I'll just get this link and then I'll send it in the text for voice. I also have a character in this file right here. It's a bit larger. Oh, that's not it. Sorry. Let me try and fix that. Why is it's not a copy? There we go. Alright, so now in text for voice, I sent a Google Drive link. There's a character in there that isn't going to stay in there for long just because it's a sort of big file. I went and poly reduced it, but it's still sort of big. But yeah, these are the rest. I'm going to be using the table and vase for my example. So, but you can use any of them. They'll all work just fine. So and I'm going to be doing this in Cinema, but all of the things that I'm going to be using should carry over to other programs. All right, let's see. Let's get our table and vase. All right, cool. So now we have this guy. So the first thing you're going to want to think about when you do this is obviously where your camera is going to be. I think for this one, we can do a sort of 3/4 view here. Toss the camera right there. And yeah, okay. And, oh, it's all just really small. All right, well, I'll just drop it in a null quick. And make it all just a bit bigger. So yeah, all right. And I'll also add a grid for the ground. Actually, in the drive, I also included a curved ground OBJ. I use it a lot, just for quick renders for your objects. Like if you just, I'll grab it right here. So basically what it does is it gives you a background that has a smooth lighting on it. So if I do file merge here and I go and grab that, curved ground. Wow, I hit cancel there. That was really something. Okay, cool. Yeah, so now I have a nice curved object here that I can have even lighting on right off the bat. All right, so I think we're still on our camera, yep. So this is a very vertical composition, but I think we'll just make it work like this, or maybe we'll square it real quick. So in a lot of other programs, you change your render resolution in the camera, but in Cinema you do it in your render settings. Here. Yeah. Back to our 3/4 view. Yeah. And I would worry more about the object in the center than the background, because you can always move the background. Or even scale it. There we go. Cool. So now we have our camera in our scene, and if we hit render, it'll just give us, at least in Redshift, in other programs it might just give you a black scene, but here it'll just give you no lighting, flat lighting scene. So I'm just going to set it to my camera quick, and that's what we're going to go for. Maybe I should move this a little bit to the right, or the left even. Do a nice center composition with some verticality to it. Alright, cool. So this is what we got. Now we're gonna think where we want our key light to come from. So I'm thinking about this maybe in a studio kind of space, just because we have this curved background and we're maybe doing some product photography here. So if we have the camera on this kind of Dutch angle here, we should probably have our key somewhere behind the camera, or yeah, somewhere behind the camera. So I think we're gonna go for a shot where the shadows lie off to the left side here. So that means that our camera, or our light, is going to have to come from this direction. So I've made some buttons here for my lights. And so, hold on, there's a few different kinds of lights that you could be using. Infinite light, point light, spotlight, area light, dome light, port, all of these. So personally, I only use the area light or the dome light. There's in small cases I might use the point light instead of the dome light, or instead of the area light for a sun object. But basically I always use the area light, because almost all objects that you encounter in the world that are emitting light have a surface area to them. Like any light bulb, any even like anything that has a diffused light with soft shadows is coming from an area light. If you have something with really hard shadows, then it's probably a point light, and the reason that the sun casts hard shadows is because it's so far away that it's basically a point light. Alright, so we're going to drop our area light back in this scene. There's a few different shape options for our area light. So here you can see it's a rectangle, and you can make it horizontally bigger or vertically bigger. But what you might want to do for your reflections, if you don't want a box on the reflection of your guys here, what are they called? Pots. You might want to use a round light. So in here you can come down here and change it from rectangle to disc, and that'll give me a disc. So there's a few, if I just make this bigger, because I think we're going to be using this a bit. So in our settings for the light here, we have a bunch of different options. If you're going for a specific shape, like maybe the light that comes through a window, maybe through some slits in a window, you can actually add a alpha texture to your light in a lot of programs, and it'll project that shape light onto wherever. So like it would create those slats without you having to make like a ton of little lights with a tiny spread value. You can do that. Also, the spread value here, you can see in my render view on the right here, hopefully, that that it's a very soft light, and also this light is basically lighting up everything in front of it because it's so wide and open, and basically the spread value will let you narrow that. So if I take the spread from 1 down to, yeah, even this looks much more like a spotlight. And that's another thing, the spotlight option for lights is a point light that's just has a direction on it and the spread is tightened. So if you want that to be like car headlights that have an area to them, you would use an area light and then close that spread down. All right, so I think we'll bring our spread up a bit because we want it to also light the scene a little bit. We're going to do a bit of a 2-in-1 with lighting the foreground and the background here. So we're going to take our light. That's about right, maybe a little bit more this way, and then we're going to orientate it towards our objects. So like this. And if you can't really tell where this is pointing, and the program doesn't have a feature where you can kind of fly around in the light as a camera, you might want to use the spread option again and like narrow it way down. And now you can see these guys are in the center of my light here. So let's widen that back up. Let's see. So yeah, I'm gonna get some nice fading there. Let's check the intensity multiplier. So in Redshift and a lot of other packages, there's both an intensity multiplier and an exposure multiplier. Intensity of your light is generally additive and exposure is multiplicative. So you're going to get to where you're going a lot faster with the exposure, and intensity is I use it for fine tuning little things. All right, so now we just have our key light, right? So now we have really harsh shadows in here, and overall the image already looks like it has some depth to it, but it's very black and white. So now we need to add our fill light. So our area light can actually even be a little smaller. Yeah, and then we'll just up the exposure a little bit. Just because then we get nice hard shadows in there. And that is in contrast to our fill light. So now if I drop down another light here, this one you're not going to see so much in the reflection, so you can keep it a square if you want. But and also a lot of people, so you saw those shapes that they use in photography, like the umbrella shape or the softbox shape, or any of those that they put their light inside of and then it reflects off of it. A lot of people will actually build those in their 3D programs and then put their lights inside of that to create real bounce lighting. But for now we can just emulate it with this. So it looks like we want to fill our far left area here. So if we probably want it to be right around here. So definitely the opposite side of the camera now. A little bit up, I think. Then we're going to rotate it and point it out there. And now what we're going to want to do is scale this way up, make it really big. Your viewport can very quickly become just completely white. In some programs it'll be very true to what the render view will look like, but in other programs it definitely won't, so you're gonna have to watch for that. Here we're gonna turn on our render view again, and let's see what we got. Oh, let's hop back in the camera. Alright, so now we no longer have our black values in our shadows. I think there's still some black values down here right at the corner, but that's for our key light to take care of, so we can leave those for now. Very nice. And also note that our shadows are not, there aren't primary shadows being cast from our fill light. There's only primary shadows being cast from our key light, so that it gives the viewer a clear sense that the light is coming from here, and not a confusion that there's two light sources. Even though there is, it's really just filling the scene. So now we'll add our key light. Something to note, if you're doing a proper key light in a 3D software, it's a lot easier if you can turn the light either transparent or hide it behind an object so that you can't see it physically. So like if in Redshift I can tell my light to sit behind this geometry and then not have the photons not hit this geometry, so that it lights everything but it. So it's like an exclusion kind of thing. But also the lights you can turn invisible so that when you're looking at them in the viewport here, it doesn't look like just like a white box behind your objects. Okay, so which you can also then take out with multipass rendering if that's an issue, but we don't need to do that. If you were gonna do this without doing that, you could either put a small light behind your object and have it be really wide and have it wrap around the surface of your object, or you can hide it and do key lights from top and the sides and the bottom, and then it'll project up onto the sides where you need it. Alright, so let's drop in our key light. So we're going to drop in an area light. And I think you'll see right here. Yeah. So now it's got that light. So it's not rendering like a black box floating here. So I'm just going to turn it off while I position this. So I find it easiest to position the key light from the camera. So we're going to do that. We're going to hop into our camera, because we want the key to basically be staring straight at the camera. So let's rotate this guy around. Or it's easiest to get a good key when it's looking straight at the camera. Something to note here. We have 4 objects, or I guess 5 objects including the table, but our main scene objects are all 4 objects are separate, and this means that a light that's being emitted from this side of this key is going to hit the edge of this object. That's okay, but it's going to create a thicker light, so you might have to bring your key down a little bit, Or if you're really going for it, you can create a separate key for, or yeah, separate rim for each of these objects. So we'll bring this guy up and out, maybe down a little bit, and we're gonna have to mess with the spread on this one. So let's already bring it down a little bit so that we can see. All right, let's see what we got so far. Okay, we got something kind of weird here. This is mostly because the exposure is too high, but also it's spilling out onto the floor and creating a whole separate lighting system, so we don't want that. So let's knock that exposure way down to start. Cool. And sometimes when I'm positioning individual lights to create my full lighting system, I turn off other ones so that I can see. But in the end, you definitely want to do your final look dev with them all on so that you can tell how each of them contributes to the scene. So we're going to go ahead and turn these ones off. And yeah, now we have rims surrounding our silhouettes here. I'll just copy that in the chat because it might be harder to see in there. There you go. All right. So I think we want to take care of how much this is reflecting on the ground, because I believe this is just the ground being reflective. And I think we don't necessarily need that to be a thing. So I'm just going to make a really quick material. Where I just up the roughness. And do nothing else. Okay. And as you can see, I just messed with the other materials that come basic on the on our little cups here, our vases, and they became very reflective, and that reflectiveness allows the highlights to wrap around the objects much more aggressively. So if you have a dull object next to a really reflective object, you're probably going to need separate lighting for them. Not that you need to make one exclusive to the lighting or whatever, but you may have to point lights specifically to highlight the dull object more to match the other one in luminance. Alright, so I think we have a decent rim here. And if we turn on these other guys, I think that highlight on the bottom that we see there might disappear. You know what, I'm actually going to just quickly save this because that might help us. There we go. All right. Oh, also I think my light might be clipping through this object here, so maybe I just bring that forward a little bit. Then up. Alright, having a moment. Might just get rid of all these mystery materials and then save this. Let's do this. Having an IPR while you're setting up your lights is also a huge bonus. It gives you a lot of immediate control on what you're doing. I think unless you're setting up just a dome light, it's almost essential for working quickly to be able to see what you're working on with the lighting, because the viewport is not a true representation of that lighting unless you're doing viewport renders. Then it should be very, very similar. And basically this viewport is being ray traced as well, just at a very basic, like the most basic possible way, so that you don't get latencies while you're working on things. But basically you can make this a higher quality and see where that quality sits for like frame rates, and then you basically have your game engine. So that's real-time ray tracing for any 3D package. All right, I think we have something pretty decent here for our 3-point lighting. I'm just going to turn on some of Redshift's light features. I don't want the vignette in this one. I'll do that and then bring it down a little bit back to where it was. So in this plot of Redshift, you can do photographic controls at like post render. So I tend to use those quite a bit for tuning in something after I've got the general gist of it in the viewport. I didn't change anything there. We still have exactly what we set up. All right, so now we have a nice smooth area. Let me just change a few render settings real quick, just because we're getting a bit of a grainy image. I'm just going to up the samples. So here we have our max samples at 16, so the next one would be to set it to 32. Also, in a lot of different engines, you can go in and tweak how many samples it'll contribute to different things. Like right now, it's probably contributing some samples to subsurface scattering, even though there is no subsurface scattering in the render. So if you wanted to come up here and do some subsurface scattering override and then set it to 0, it won't even look for it now. It won't send samples out to look for it. And you can go and set up your individual setup for each render to maximize your speed output, and you can really get it to crank really fast. I've gotten it to do, I don't know, 4 frames a second. So all right, so now we have a nice smooth render, and we have a really subtle rim light. We might want to actually bring it up just a little bit, but now we're getting a lot of information throughout our scene. Everything's in here. Our shadows don't look that great. Basically what we've got here is the distance here is the size of our key light. So from the center of our shadow to the outside edge, this is basically shooting from the left side of the area light, and this is shooting from the left side, and the photons are crossing and then shooting a shadow onto the wall. And this is in here is the soft area. So what we can do is go into our, and we can label these lights as well, which might be nice. Let's get this. This is our key light. This is our fill. And this is our rim. All right. So for the assignment that in Calyptus's class, this is what he's looking for, basically. He wants you to do one render with all of them and then renders with individual ones. For this key, since we're getting these wide shadows that we've decided we don't want, we can just scale it. We can just scale it down. So let me turn on this render view again, hop back in the camera. We'll get our little selection here, and I'll show you the shadow as we scale this. So right now we have this nice big soft shadow, and that might be what you're going for, so you don't have to do this, but I want like a much harder shadow. So I'm gonna take this area light and shrink it down, and you'll see as I shrink this down, that shadow becomes harder. And as I make it smaller, it's gonna put out less light. Some do adaptive changes, but this one I'll have to go in here and change the exposure up to back where it was. So like there. But yeah, now you can see the width of this soft area is the width of this light. So now that I've reduced the size of the light, the shadow is now much harder, and you can see the silhouettes of our vases here on the wall. Hop back in the camera. Yeah. See, now we have a much harder shadow because our key is much smaller. Yeah, perfect. So I said I was gonna increase the exposure on the rim, so we'll watch that happen. Okay, so it looks like that's pulled a lot of white into this shadow. But it's also given us that classic rim look on this one here. And I think part of the reason that it's not so much working on the table here is probably the just the fact that I'm trying to use one big one for all these separate objects. I'll give you an example for maybe this tall one real quick. If I grab a area light here and I just go and I drag that over here, oh, really bright, and then I sort of match it to the size of my object here. And luckily the silhouette of our object here is actually very close to a rectangle. I need to turn this light around. It's facing the wrong way. But yeah. There we go. And now we make it taller. And then what we can do here, like I was saying earlier, we can go into our light. We can go to project and we can switch it to include, and then we can just say that I only want to include this object, and now we have our perfect rim on this object here. So all the way around we have this really thin strip of white. It looks like we're missing a little bit of a rim on the top of it, so what I'll do is I'll just bring it up a little bit, maybe even like this. There we go. And now we're starting to see that rim there because the light is coming from here and it's bouncing on this lip and it's shooting out. So you're going to see more of a lip if... hold on. Okay, yeah, it's got a small bevel on it. But the bigger this bevel is, so it looks like we have like a single polygon bevel, maybe 2 polygons here. So now we get that rim light. So this is why it's important to bevel your edges so that you get lights like this around here. Oh yeah, also as a disclaimer, all of the 3D assets that I put in the drive for you guys are just off of CG Trader. They're all just like the free ones. So take it up with them if you want to use them for something. But yeah, now we have a nice rim on this object. And if you wanted to then kind of sync this into the scene, so now what's happening with that that compositing shot that I showed you earlier is happening with this vase. It looks out of place because now it has a light on it that doesn't belong, or not that it doesn't belong, but there's no justification for it anywhere, and it's not showing on any other objects. So now it looks out of place. So if you wanted to use this light here, you would have to do it on these other objects as well, which means individually making them for each of these, which sounds like a long process, but honestly it's not that bad. You can basically take this, drag it, and then switch the preferences. All right. Yeah. So that was our spare key. And I think that's just about it. If you guys have any questions, I would love to answer them. And if you need any help when you're doing your project next week, feel free to reach out. So if you have any questions, I'd love to hear them. It looks like we also have Alex Schupel here, who does lighting and rendering every day for work. So Alex, do you have any comments on this? No, he might be away. That's okay. Let's see. All right, I'm just gonna feel free to be done or leave. I'm just gonna put textures on this. These objects have UVs. Oh, they do.
Max, I don't think we can hear you. Is anybody else having the same issue?
Oh, is he talking?
Oh
No, I
no,
haven't
I'm
been
I'm
able to.
not talking. I just
Okay,
I,
cool.
I asked for if anyone had questions, and I'm now just putting textures on it.
Okay, cool.
Yeah,
Just wanted to make sure.
yeah. Uh, uh, Redshift materials have this cool thing called coding. Um, Basically, in this thing, you can add another layer here that'll act as a surface refraction or a surface before the main surface, and it doesn't have to use subsurface or anything. So I like using that. It's a nice addition. Yeah. So now I can add back in my roughness. Can add thickness to it, and then you can port that out to the bump, which is very cool in the coat. Hmm.
Hmm. There's a lot of noise around my shadows. Do I just need more samples?
Yeah. So, what program are you using?
Maya. Maya.
Maya. Okay, and that's Arnold.
Yeah.
Okay, so I don't know if you have sampling overtures in there, but if you do, it'll be your shadows will be connected to your light samples, and the and if you want to just quickly fix it, you can just up your max samples.
Mm. At 5 right now. I'll up it up to 10. Let's see how that goes.
Mm. Yeah, so with your samples, you want to go up by increments of that two multi multiplying. So like 4 samples, 8 samples, that sort of thing. It helps the computation.
Okay. Right. I got a render. Abs-
Ooh, nice.
I think
Yeah.
I think the key light could be a little brighter, but I don't know.
I like the so the key is kind of behind the head area of the horse, or because it's on the top, and I can, or I guess it's kind of above, right?
The felt light I've placed to the side, to the left of the statue. Here, let me
Yeah.
give me a sec. So it's my my fill light is here, my key light
Mm-hmm.
is here, and my backlight is here. Um, in
Okay, gotcha.
perspective of the camera, the fill light is above and behind the camera,
Mm-hmm.
and the fill light is slightly to its left, but also a
Mm-hmm.
little above.
Gotcha. Okay. So I think in this case, when you render your lights, do they come out as like white objects, or are they invisible?
When I render my I think they're invisible. I mean, like, what do you mean? Like in the final
Like,
render?
does the plane itself show up like the light plane for the area light?
Only in the blend like that. Is that what you mean? Like this kind of thing?
I mean that looks good. I'm just how do I say it? I think I can turn it on in my render view. The lights like this rim light uh visible. Here it is. So now um it's rendering the light as an object, right?
Hmm?
So now it shows up in the render as like something that's, let me just use this to clamp the exposure here. See that? See how the light comes in as a plane?
Hmm? Oh, yeah. I don't. Well, no, it's not showing it for mine, at least.
Okay.
Lights are should be invisible, but yeah. I don't know. Let's see. I do think the fill light could be not the fill light. The key light could be a bit brighter, but that's all. But I don't know. I'm
Mm-hmm.
still unfamiliar with 3-point lighting. Maybe the
Yeah.
fill light could be darker. I just want more contrast.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. That would do it. Also, if you move your rim from your I think what he's asking for in the assignments is for a rim light, and I think you have a kicker right now.
Like this being the rim light.
Yeah.
I think that's a good rim light because it's focused on the person, but not as much as on the horse, which
Mm-hmm.
is pretty good in terms of focusing on the figure, I think. But
Yeah, I would
I need,
just
yeah.
yeah. So hold on, let me take a snip of this. So um, I think it's a really good kicker for sure. I think it does exactly what that should do. But I think if you want to make it on the character, it should like follow the rim of the silhouette, uh, like this. Uh,
Oh, okay. So be a little more behind the. Okay, let me see if I
yeah.
can do that.
If
So
I
I'd
open
have
up
to
the
move this light back
presentation,
here and then rotate it a bit more.
yeah,
Um, it's showing up, but I think it needs to be brighter. Let's see.
yeah. I'll drop the image in the chat. Oh, you don't want to paste? Okay. Well, we tried. Huh. Well, I can always do this.
pretty cool.
Yeah, there you go.
Maybe a little bit higher though.
Hmm. You can also make it bigger if you want, and then just lower the intensity or the exposure so that it kind of wraps around the edges more. Yeah, it's looking good. Does he want you to texture them as well?
Yeah. I just put in a default Arnold's standard Arnold's material.
Hmm.
I'm gonna text. Well, this is a 3D scan. This statue here. It
Oh.
came with a texture, but I think it was in a blend. So either I'm gonna figure out how to work with it, or I'm just gonna put in my own material,
Hmm.
which whatever works. But yeah,
Yeah.
and it seemed like a pretty boring because the setup right now is pretty. Um,
Yeah. You could also
it's-
just put like a marble texture on the whole thing, or like stone, because it
yeah,
is a sculpture.
it's set into this like little one room, but I wanted to spice it up, so I put some placeholder paintings, which that's gonna like put in a lot of work just for some background detail.
Yeah, I think that they definitely help the scene quite a bit, actually, breaking up the background.
Definitely.
It makes it feel like a real museum as
Yeah.
opposed to statue in a room.
Definitely.
The paintings will be cool, especially if you can get like the if you can use old oil paintings, and if you convert them to black and white, you might be able to get like a good height material out of it to make some good bumps to like make it actually look like how old paintings crack. That would look real cool.
Mm.
As opposed to just, you know, images. It would look cool. I think that, that'd be cool. And you should use bronze. I think bronze would be a cool material for this.
I
Oh.
think the original material this model came with used like a bronze.
I think the statue's like an old bronze statue.
Mhm.
Ooh, and if you wanted, then you could like oxidize parts of it with like a ambient occlusion map. Ooh.
Why?
You just sound like not enthused.
Me? No,
Yeah,
actually, if anything, I'm more material work's my favorite part of everything.
yeah.
So sitting here talking about materials, I'm sitting here, I'm like, there could be. I'm just thinking, especially the painting thing. I'm definitely gonna give that a shot on my own. But yeah, what's the topology on that look like? Because I don't know if this is like, if clicking on it just makes the whole thing green in Maya, or if that's the wireframe.
It's the wireframe that's really small. Its topology is
It's pretty dense, isn't it?
for 3D scan. Oh, I just scanned. For a 3D scan, it's pretty fine, I think.
Oh, that's
It's
not
just
bad at all.
not bad. It's just a bunch of triangles.
Yeah, it looks like it's already been optimized in some sort.
Hmm.
Yeah, since the topology is so small, it's all green, as opposed to something way
Yeah,
less
like,
poly like that.
okay. Gotcha.
Yeah, we're just doing
Are you
this.
gonna animate the camera?
Um, No, just making a couple of render shots. Though I learned back in the fall when we did render shots of the character models that we could just keyframe the camera and just add in different frames for the poses we set.
Mm.
So
We only need stills, right?
we only need stills. Calypso said we could do an animation. All right, so this is the texture it came with. Oh, that's not really good. That's really glossy.
That is very glossy. Alright, I'm gonna leave while the rest of my fucking castle renders so my GPU doesn't kill itself.
Oh yeah.
It's not having fun, especially like right now it's doing okay because we're still in the mostly static parts.
Mm-hmm.
But soon I'm moving over to doing like the volumes for the dust,
Mm-hmm.
and it's not gonna be fun.
Did you see my computer try to quit on me because I am recording this, streaming it on Discord, and rendering at the same time?
Your computer wants nothing to do with it.
Yeah.
Very funny. But yeah, I'm gonna head out. Hopefully, let this schmiz come together in a fashion that is nice, and then I have to sit down and I have to composite it, and hopefully this whole thing doesn't take fucking 9 hours. It will, but I don't want it to. Alright, later, y'all.
Later, Spencer.
Alright, see ya.
There we go.
Oh, that looks
Yeah.
good. Nice.
It's still very glossy. Yeah, I think I do have to make a new material for it.
Yeah. I'd imagine the photo scan doesn't take into account glossiness. Because it
This looks
just
like-
takes
this-
in color.
It looks like it belongs outside, to be honest, but it's whatever.
Yeah.
All right. I've got other stuff to work on, but learning 3-point lighting is nice. Thank you, Max.
Yep.
I'm gonna head out. Goodbye.
Glad to have you. See you around.
Thanks, babe.
Oh, you're here. I called you out and you did not respond.
Did you? I might have been on a call. What'd you say?
No, I was just like, this man does it for a career. What does he have to say about it? And then it was silence. I was like,
Oh, damn it. I would have. When? When did you say that? I missed it.
Oh, towards the end. Yeah,
Lighting is basically my career.
yes. That is what I said. I was like, this man knows all of it. So maybe he has some good points that I completely missed.
I'm so sad. I could have unmuted my mic and screamed.
All right, I think this is all I'm gonna put into this. There we go.
Yeah.
Ta-da! That's way overlit. Okay.
You've done it.
Du-du-du-du. This is why we have magic bullet looks now.
I wish it was easier to move around in there.